Good afternoon. Thanks so much for hopping on, Tom. Looking forward to continuing our conversation just around the opposing viewpoints of whether or not God exists, whether it's probable that God exists or impossible. Just to review, I'm taking the theist position that there is a God. Tom is taking the position that there is no God. And we're having a conversation and paying attention to what evidence, what arguments we can study and discuss that lends weight to either side of that position.
Minor details.
Minor details, exactly, to kind of review what we've gone over in the past in our conversations from my side, being the theist side. The first point is the universe has a beginning. That points towards a creator because that which has a beginning has a cause, and therefore from that, the universe has a cause because it has a beginning. The second one being the complex fine-tuning of the universe, kind of the anthropic argument. It defies coincidence that there's some handiwork of an intelligent designer that's exhibited in this world. The third, obviously from my position being the Christian position, that there's evidence, historical evidence for the resurrection of Jesus that includes the empty tomb, eyewitness accounts, and the origin of the Christian faith and how it came about, not through state sponsorship or through war, but through people dying for their faith, not just in the Roman Colosseum, but in other places, and it not having European roots as much as African in a lot of ways. Those eyewitness accounts and the ways in which the resurrection of Jesus was recorded and shown, I believe, holds to establishing the divinity of Jesus. Fourthly, God can be known immediately and experienced by those who seek after God. But the conversation today is really focused on this kind of classic argument over whether or not God exists, regarding objective moral values, regarding this problem of suffering and evil as a reality in this world. So my position being the position I'm trying to hold to is our objective moral values are real. We experience natural order in this world, and we also experience moral order in this world, as some things are right and good, and some things are bad or wrong. And to make distinctions between those two, and how do we come through with that? I hold to that those objective moral values are evidence that there is a God, that is God is an impartial outside creator who's the only one who could establish a universal standard of right and wrong across all time. So those are kind of the classical positions that I'm sharing with you now. And really, too, we're going to be talking about how does evil and the nature of it either point to the existence of God or point away from it. And the real challenge is thinking through, if God is all powerful and all loving, how could God not stop evil now? That's a real challenge for theologians, Christians, other people of faith who hold to there being a God. That's a really difficult question, and one in which I hope our conversation here with Tom can help you in your understanding of this question in Christian circles is called the theodicy, this issue of struggling and suffering in life as a result of evil. And obviously, there is evil that results from human choice and human people choosing to perpetrate horrific acts against one another. But then there's also the challenge of natural suffering, just the breakdown of the human body, whether it's through disease, cancer, so on and so forth, or through natural disasters like earthquakes and tsunamis, and all of these things that make life challenging. And how do we think through these being either intellectual objections we have to whether or not God exists, or emotional ones, where we say, I could never believe in a God who allows suffering to exist. Why would you say that? So, hope to explore that with you and to share a little bit more as we discuss with Tom. So, thanks for coming on, Tom, and take it away.
Thank you, Rob. Excuse me. I've been enjoying our talks over the last little while regarding the whole theist, atheist debates and the different angles to look at things and the different, actually, the different finer details of our discussions. As opposed to just keeping it on generalities. Just to kind of go back on, what you just said. Your thoughts on every beginning having a cause for it may not necessarily be. I mean, you apply that the same. You actually don't apply that principle to your own God. So for the same reason, for the same logic that you don't apply it to your God, you can easily apply it to the universe as well. It's just attributing one of it's the same thought of something has been there forever, or something is in a constant state of whatever it is, as opposed to it being created with a cause. The anthropic principle and the fine-tuning principle, to me, isn't really, because again, the majority of everything around us wants us dead, as far as I'm concerned. You go up high enough, you're dying of lack of oxygen and hypothermia. You go down hot, it's going to get a little bit too hot, no oxygen again. So there is, again, the sweet zone even on our own planet, never mind in the universe. The universe, again, really, as far as I said before, it doesn't really care for any of us. Whether we live or die tomorrow, it's going to continue on doing what it's going to do, and it's not going to blink an eye, as opposed to one being passing away on a speck of a rock in space. The historical aspect of looking at whether God exists is difficult, because no proper historian in my book will attribute to the supernatural, because they can't legitimately document it. Unless they have witnessed something supernatural, you can't document that something supernatural actually happened, because you have no basis to say this. There's no proof of anything supernatural ever happening. So for any reputable historian to say some magical being did this and this, wouldn't be considered reputable after the fact, in my opinion. And I think that you're basing that historical fact, that knowledge, on one book. Okay, that book is a compilation of multiple books put together today. Fine, but still, it's one book. It's what is said is to be the word of God, supposedly, or as they would have wanted it. But it's still based on one book. There is no corroborating evidence across other cultures. You're not going to go to the Hindu religion and find documentation that's going to prove Christianity. Or Buddhism. You may find it in Islam, because it is related. It's one of the Abrahamic religions. So yes, there is the correlation there, but you go outside of that, you're not going to find any correlation or any kind of description or anything of Christianity, because there's just nothing there. Each is his own, pretty much, at that point in time. Again, going to the argument of mutually exclusive gods. You can't believe in two gods at the same time. You can't, be believing in Buddha and Jesus at the same time, or, the Hindu gods, or whatever they may be, and Jesus. It logically can't work. So you have to pick one. But for the same reason that you're excluding all the rest, you can exclude yours too. It's just you have to apply the same logic to it. I think the question of good and evil is definitely a difficult one for most theists, because of the fact of it's only several options when it comes to the question of evil in particular, for myself at least. Either like you had mentioned at one time, God needs evil in order to show us what good is, which I don't know if I can understand what. No? Okay.
Yeah, no, I hope I didn't say God needs evil to show us how much he loves us.
Well, no, just to show us the opposite, essentially, like the kind of the counterbalance. That's kind of what I got of what you said. And anyways, we'll continue on. The other one is, that you said that God limits his powers. Well, if God's going to create a being and he already knows what this being is going to do ahead of time, and he's going to limit his powers as to not stopping this being from committing an evil act, then he's just as complicit in the act. As far there's just no other way of looking at it. You can look at it in a crime perspective where you have two defendants and one pulls a trigger and the other one sits by and watches. Well, are they both as guilty? Yeah, because the one that watched didn't do anything to stop the one pulling the trigger. And then
we would still say, me and you, Tom, obviously, and a lot of people would say that there's a different gravity for the one who's committing it versus the one who's just observing it.
What if the one observing is the one encouraging? That has happened.
Right.
Then what? What if the one watching is the one egging the person on to shoot?
Right. They are just as complicit. And that's why I think it goes back to our conversation about those guards who just say, I was just following orders. It's like you can't pass the moral responsibility buck on.
Well, in a situation where it's say three people, right? And one person is obviously going to be the victim, and you have two perpetrators, and the two perpetrators have a gun. Say just for a thought experiment here, right? One of the perpetrators is holding the gun to the victim's head. All right. The other perpetrator is standing just holding his gun. That perpetrator has the choice of putting a bullet into the guy that's holding the gun and letting the victim go, or letting it happen. Does he not?
Yeah, he's got options.
Right. But the Nazi guard doesn't, because he's going to die if he doesn't do it. He's dead. That's the difference. You're not going to go against a system, but you can go against one person if you're armed.
Well, I feel like you're highlighting two different dilemmas. Like, sure, there is the dilemma for that guard,
but you tried to bring them together, and I want to bring them apart.
Okay, so show me.
That's what I just did. They're not the same. That's what I'm trying to explain. Like you tried to show them as one and the same, but I don't think that they are at all. Morally speaking, I don't think they are at all, because one, you're committing suicide, and the other one, you're taking out a bad guy and letting somebody go free that was potentially going to die.
Right. So in that sense, that those means really are justified by the ends in some way, but at the same time, that dilemma is only true if the objective reality is there is a moral order where murder is wrong across the board, across all situations.
But it's not. We know that.
Well, okay, so just to
people get off on homicide.
Right. But I think that is the question that we're always faced with, is when is it permissible for a human being to take the life of another human being? Why is it immoral?
I mean, personally,
versus the animals. So let me just address some of those issues you raised just real quickly. I was just thinking through that first one about
the beginning cause.
The beginning cause, kind of that there being an uncaused first cause, that being outside of time and space. It's hard to comprehend in some ways, but it is an entirely different category in some ways than we've ever documented or grappled with. Right? That's both the mystery, but also the amazing ability of us to comprehend that the universe.
But we say that nothing can exist outside of time and space.
Well,
everything must be within a realm of time and space.
Everything that has a beginning, it was within our experience, has a cause.
Okay.
So if you just follow that all the way back to the very beginning, a big bang, a flash of light, whatever it might be, where time, space, and matter have some correlative, coinciding nature about them, where they all come together, then we could say, well, what caused them in the first place? If this being is outside of that, is eternal, then we're getting at, well, is this the creator? Is there a creator who started all of that? And I think that's what a lot of physicists and cosmologists and others really wrestle with. But to the second point, you highlighted, there is a sweet zone that we live in not too high, not too low, just enough oxygen. Kind of the rule of threes, like you can only go about 3 minutes with no oxygen before you're really starting to struggle. You can only go about 3 days without water before you're really
3
getting
weeks without food.
right, and 3 weeks without food, right? Exactly. So it's like these patterns that we have, just
It
pointing
still
to.
doesn't point to a trinity. That's just a
Right, no,
a
no,
good law to go by, so you don't die in the woods.
I'm not dipping into numerology, that's for sure. No, for me, that fine tuning, it would seem that it lends weight to there being some irreducibly complex law, a natural law and a moral law, and something that we discover that is not of our own making, that points towards a creator. And then lastly, like the personal narrative, I can only talk about how belief in God has shaped my life in some ways. Obviously, it's given me some order to making sense of some of the things in life, but certainly not all of them. And I think too, if I go to a historian or to somebody who starts talking about the supernatural, sure, I'm going to be skeptical. I think that though too, I'm going to be skeptical of those who just say, let's worship, or let's just put all our hope and faith in intellect or science, and goes towards a totalitarian kind of thinking that says, well, reality is all about this life and there's just nothing possible after it. Or the other end of the spectrum, the religious fanatic who says this world means nothing, it's all about the afterlife, and it's just all about getting to a heaven after you die. So I don't think it's that, for lack of a better word, I don't think it's that binary, or there's not that much of a duality. Like it's not that completely black and white where it's like, well, this life is all there is, or the afterlife, or whatever happens after death is really all there is. I think it's a mix. That's just a position that I've been thinking through as far as what Scripture says. I think that there are other books as well that kind of lend to the story of Jesus of Nazareth, and of there being a historical person there who really changed history in a lot of ways, outside of the Bible. And I think that those testimonies or those eyewitness accounts, those writings, don't discredit it, but just add more weight to there being historical evidence for Jesus being God. So that's kind of my position on that. And then I think too, we're kind of getting at right now suffering and evil in the world, and how do we make sense of it if God is all powerful and all loving? So maybe I could give you a little analogy.
Okay.
Let's say, because you're in Canada and there's bears up there, like there's bears, and there's this bear that comes through the neighborhood and is just not only eating people's trash, but he's really, the bear is wrecking the neighborhood and
Yep. Problem bears. Yeah,
terrorizing
it happens all the time.
Right, terrorizing children,
Yep.
and maybe attacking them, and so on and so forth. So that's part of the bear's nature in some way, but
Sure.
in another way, the bear is not acting in a natural way, and so a hunter has to be called in to take out the bear. So
sometimes they get relocated to 1,000 kilometers away where there's no chance of that coming back too.
Right. So the hunter decides, okay, this seems like a bear that has just lost his way, and the hunter, instead of breaking out the hunting rifle, gets the tranquilizer gun. But he also sets out a bear trap, a metal claw trap. And he sets it out, and one night the bear gets caught by the metal bear trap. And so the bear is pissed. He's hurt. He's pulled. He's trying to get out of this bear trap, and it's caught on his leg, and he sees the hunter coming at him. And so what does he do? He's obviously angry and upset and hurt, and he starts trying to charge at the hunter. But the hunter takes out a tranquilizer gun. And now the bear's thinking, gosh, not only is my paw in this bear trap and is hurt, but this hunter, this person, is pointing a gun at me. And he thinks, gosh, this hunter is just the worst. So the hunter tranquilizes the bear, throws him in the back of a pickup truck, and takes him a couple hundred miles north to release him into the wild. And as the bear comes to in the wild, he looks down at his paw and he sees that his paw is still in the bear trap. And he sees the hunter pushing his paw further down into the bear trap and thinks, gosh, this hunter is malevolent. He hates me. He wants me to suffer more. But in reality, the hunter has tranquilized the bear and now is trying to get him free from the bear trap by pushing him a little bit further down before he releases him. What's the point of that analogy? I think when it comes to our discussion about God and evil, in a real way, we are not fully in a position, we're in a position like the bear, in making sense of why would God create a world where there is suffering? Couldn't God create a better world where there is no suffering? Well, we're not in a position fully to understand why suffering exists, but also if there is some redemptive thing that could be brought about by it, something that could happen that might change history, that might change people for the better. Scientists have this kind of chaos theory about these large systems where just the smallest, slightest adjustment can set off a huge chain reaction and just cause everything to go. Kind of like a snowflake starting an avalanche. And to think through this universe as, first of all, it's just massive and expanding and oh yes, does obey the laws of thermodynamics and entropy. It does dissolve. We all dissolve in one way or another eventually. But to think through, well, is that the end of it? Is that the end and be all of it? Is just absurdity? Or could there really be a creator who is going to push our hands further down through that trap before pulling us out? And there could be something good that eventually would result, that we're not privy to that perspective just yet. I'll hand it over to you, Tom, as your reactions to that.
Okay. With regards to your bear paw in a trap, I'm curious. I kind of had a question. I didn't want to interrupt you midstream there as you're going quite eloquently. Why would your God want to keep our paw in the trap for millions of years, as opposed to letting it out? You know, during the course of human existence, we've been around for a while in one form of another. Are you telling me that our proverbial paw has been in that bear trap for as long as we've existed? For what reason? Why don't you let it go? How long is this bear trap going to continue holding us in? I'm kind of curious. Like, when is the end of the time spent in the bear trap? Is it when we're off to heaven? Is it when God pulls the springs back and you go, there's no more suffering for you or for anyone? I'm curious. I think the idea of suffering in itself lends very easily to the non-anthropic principle, because we suffer because it's not perfect. Our environment is not, you can't walk outside your house, naked and survive.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to die. You know, where you are, it's not warm enough for you to survive. You have no shelter, no clothes on your back. You know, same here. I wouldn't survive in, +5 Celsius. I'd freeze to death at nighttime. You'd shiver to death, mm-hmm. Right? So again, it's not a very conducive place for life. We've made it for us. We've adapted the environment for us. We have houses that make heat, that make us be able to walk around in shorts and a t-shirt and pretty much naked as if we wanted to, and it's still comfortable, no problem. But you can't do that outside in the majority of the earth. So it's not a really Goldilocks zone. There's an extremely small amount of it that you can actually say is completely suited to life, where you can, live outside, live off the land, you have fresh water, all the necessities of life, I'm not saying any luxuries, but you have the necessities of life that you could survive. I think there is extremely few places like that in the world. Maybe in the Caribbean, some tropical areas where you have tropical fruits hanging on and stuff like that, where again it's truly a nice place all year round. But again, I don't think it really leads to any kind. Look at any kind of most diseases. A lot of diseases are, believe it or not, geographically based. Some are extremely. Arthritis, for instance, is a mainly thing in the northern western hemisphere. It's not so prevalent in Asian culture and African culture as so much in Caucasians for some reason, from European descent. So there are certain things that just affect us, that affect different races differently when it comes to diseases, and some of it's geographical, some isn't, depending on the climate. Do you live in a humid climate? Do you live in a dry climate? Are you more prone to having your joints hurt because the temperatures and the barometric pressure is constantly fluctuating, or not? Do you live somewhere like Dubai where it's sunny all year long and it never fluctuates any, aside from the natural temperature? It's always sunny. So there's that whole element of it. But again, the question of actually evil is what I wanted to kind of focus this back down to. Again, did your God create evil? If he created all, then evil must have been part of his creation. Why?
So just to get back to, so did God create evil?
Yes.
Unequivocally, no. God cannot create evil because God's character is good. So where does this evil show up on the scene? I think that a lot of theologians have wrestled with, okay, well, is it the free will that God gave to human beings and humans caused evil to start? That's certainly one position, but it would seem
wouldn't God know this ahead of time and still allowed it to happen?
If God foreknew that, why would God take the risk of giving us free will? So there's no such. It is a logical inconsistency to say
but there's no such thing as theologic free will. I stand behind that. There cannot be. If God knows what you're going to do tomorrow, how much free will can you have?
Well, just because someone foreknows something doesn't mean that they forced you into it. I mean,
no. But I'm saying, how much actual free will do you think you as Rob know or have if I already know ahead of time what you're going to have for lunch tomorrow? You don't have any free will at that point in time. I know what you're going to have. I'm not going to tell you, but
does that
I know what you're going to.
Yeah, but just because there's foreknowledge of that, does that mean that contradicts the existence of free will and human agency?
Yes, because so what you're saying is any schmuck can change God's plan? If part of God's plan was you having XY or having a club sandwich for lunch tomorrow for whatever reason, because you were supposed to meet somebody, I don't know, whatever. You bumped into somebody that could have been a good business associate for life. You never know. But say God knows that you're going to have a club sandwich for lunch tomorrow at a certain spot at a certain time. And now you're going to come in and say, you know what? I don't like God's plan. I'm going to change that by interjecting my own free will. That doesn't work so well, now does it?
Well, our experience of life seems.
No, but I'm saying, can you just answer that? Like, that doesn't work.
Well, yeah, but part of it is the simplicity, Tom, of thinking through something like love. Love is spontaneous, in some ways, right? It involves some spontaneity. It involves some.
I think lust, it might be spontaneous, but I think love takes a little bit of time to establish.
Oh, there you go. Right. So then you're also saying that love takes discipline, right? That love takes a focused choice, a lot of choices when we don't feel like it, when the lust has gone, or whenever any other chemical reaction has, the spontaneity of it, it goes. And then there's another side to it where there's discipline, there's choice, there's a repeatability to it. And that involves taking my free will, my choice, and disciplining it and getting focused with how do I.
But what I'm saying is you can't have free will if the plan is already ahead of you. There's no free will. You're just going according to plan.
I'm just going according to plan.
Your life is according to a divine plan. God has a plan for you, right?
So
Like
let's follow that a little.
that's the thought.
Well, yeah, but let's follow that a little bit further then. So if there is no free will, that's basically saying then that God is the author of evil.
Yes, that is what I'm saying.
So what is the
If there is a God, I mean, we're going by this line of thought. If there is a God, he is the arbiter of evil. Yes.
So what's the evidence then that God is the creator of evil, or that rather that there's some being who knows that evil is going to happen and doesn't
But
intervene? What does that
if God is omniscient, knowing all,
right?
right? And God is going to create something that is going to do an evil act. And God is going to sit back and limit his powers and allow this evil act to happen. He's just as liable as the person committing it.
Mm-hmm.
Am I wrong?
No, so you're saying he's just as liable. So we're saying that the creator of the universe is just as liable as a little creature who chooses to punch somebody in the face. He's just as responsible for
If God knew, if God is omniscient, again, if God is all-knowing, so either are you saying he's not knowing at this point in time, or he doesn't want this?
No, God is omniscient, omnipresent, and God's everywhere.
So God knows that this is going to happen. And
Yeah.
he creates this being with the knowledge that this being is going to do an evil act and allows it to continue, as opposed to tossing it into the reject pile and recycling it for new material and trying again. Saying something screwed up on this one. It was a lemon. It was made on Friday afternoon.
Right.
Right? Why not? You're God. Why would you not stop it? Why would you not stop that imperfect psychopath possibly from going into society? If you could, either you don't know it's going to happen, or you don't want it to, or you don't want to stop it. If we're going by just the belief system, if I'm not even looking on the atheist line.
Yeah, but there's no logical inconsistency between saying that God exists and that evil exists. I mean, I don't see where you're demonstrating that. I think you're saying, okay, there's an emotional dislike of a being who knew something would happen and yet didn't intervene to make. I mean, going back to
he created the situation for it to happen. He created everything. He created the being that was going to do it. He created the situation to happen at the right time. He put the victim there at the right time. He masterminded the whole play. He's the puppeteer.
Right. So there's he created it all, but at the same time he gives
and he's not evil.
So
he created the stage for this evil act to happen, and is the puppeteer on top. And you're telling me that's not an evil act?
But you yourself said that God limited his power by giving us free will.
No, that was actually you. You said that on multiple occasions, that God has limited his power to give us free will. I'm taking words out of your mouth now.
Okay, so let's say that God has limited his power to give us ideals of freedom, love, dignity.
So again, let me just put this in another.
But just some of these terms that I'm throwing out here: autonomy, human free will, love, dignity, choice. These are words in our experience of life that, they mean something. I mean, in our experience of romance or love towards our wives, we had maybe a spontaneous lust at one point, but through discipline, through some choices, we chose each other, and we wake up each morning and we continue to make a choice for each other instead of going out and just finding someone more attractive. Agreed. So now, if God is the author of love and freedom and all that, how can we hold that just because God allows us these things and then we abuse them? How can we attribute that to God instead of to ourselves in some ways?
Can I just call it a question here? If you're going to attribute all that's good to God, then you need to go both sides of that fence and attribute all that's bad to God too, because he created it all. You can't just have a uni-sided argument here. If you're going to say God created love, well, then God created evil acts as well. God created hate.
I'm not also going to say that the devil made me do it, right, Tom?
I know, but I'm saying if you're going to give him credit for something like love, you must equally give him credit for hate, because those are equal emotions in my head, and they're very strong.
you've said though that our hand has been in the bear trap, to use that analogy, for millions of years. So why hasn't God ended it? Well, there is kind of an end date to this universe. There is sort of a big crunch, if you will.
There's an
There
end date
is
to us.
to judgment and to bringing about a real reckoning with evil. And I think that part of our grappling with this, well, can't we just attribute evil to God then as well? That God is somehow the source of evil.
What
I
I'm saying
think
is you're giving him all the credit for everything good, but saying, you know what, we can't give him, we can't, put anything bad on him. Why? He made it. That doesn't make any sense to me.
right. But so let's say we did put bad on him, and we say, okay, God is.
But that's what I'm trying to say. In this thought experiment where I'm going along with you, that there is a God, I'm just saying he's equally good and equally a dick at the same time. Excuse my language.
I see where you're going with that analogy.
If you're gonna have a yin yang kind of thing at the end of the day, it's got to be. You can't just have everything in your credits and nothing in your debits when it comes to accounting, can you? No, you gotta. It's somewhat of an equality. You can't. You know what I mean? You can't just say, "Oh, everything is good. I'm going to give credit to Bob, and everything is bad. I'm going to blame it on his brother." Huh? That doesn't work.
And that's where the narrative is very much clearly, okay, so you're wrestling with some real evil and suffering in the objective world, in this world that we have here. So what's the narrative about this creator of this objective world, as far as, did he create evil? Did he allow for these circumstances of suffering to continually take place?
But he must have. If he's the creator of all, Rob, then he must have created this stage for all the evil acts to happen. He must have put everybody there and made the stage and brought the audience.
Okay, so...
And then flip the switch to say, go. Action.
Yeah, but then part of the narrative is, well, where is God trying to address the evil in this world, or kind of bring about an end to it? And part of that has to be the story of Jesus being crucified upon the cross.
But I don't think he is. If a God exists, I mean, look at what's happening today in India from COVID. My God, it's a catastrophe over there. They're funeral pyres in the streets.
Right, and
because of all the bodies stacking up.
Right, and there's famine in Yemen that is a result, not just.
No, I know. I'm just saying, like right now, what we're seeing. You're seeing essentially a human catastrophe going on in India, and these people are dying for lack of oxygen. Mm-hmm. That's it. Oxygen. They cannot get enough oxygen into their system.
Right. Well, eventually all of us
Serious?
come to that shortage of oxygen and die.
I know, but Rob, come on. You're talking tanks of oxygen, something that is doable.
Right.
And you're telling me that how many hundreds of thousands of people are in it, have no access to this? Really?
Right. And that becomes the question of, is this a God issue, or is this a human issue? Is this something that we can
again, if it's a human issue, it automatically is a God issue, because he is the puppeteer of our little play, according to you.
Well, but here's the thing though, Tom. He set it in motion, but he didn't just step back and just watch us self-destruct. He entered into it in the cross of Jesus to address some evil, but also it's still going on. So what does that mean? That also means that human beings are inherently evil. We have chosen to do wrong. This is not some feel-good, like, self-help book section. We have chosen to do wrong. We have chosen to rip each other off. And so it doesn't surprise us after a while. We get numb to the amount of suffering and evil that humans perpetrate on other human beings. Mm-hmm. And so that strangely points us to the presence of God being some type of moral foundation upon which we can call evil, evil. And we can make these sweeping judgments and say, that's tragic. When you say what's happening in India is tragic, that's not a neutral statement. That's very much assessing and saying that what happened there is wrong and shouldn't be so.
Okay. But again, if there was a God that could have designed this entire, say, play directed this play otherwise.
Mhm.
Yet he chose to let it play out like this because it's his divine plan to have all these people die because they can't breathe.
Mhm.
Really? Does that make sense? Like, that's evil to me. Make someone die from suffocation? I don't know. That's not a really pleasant way to die, as far as I'm concerned. You know what? Like,
There is no pleasant way to die.
I beg to differ, but that's okay. You know, especially being men, but I'll leave it at that. You know, we can always die with a smile on our face. That's definitely, you know.
Yeah, I mean, maybe dying in our sleep might be a little bit more pleasant, but I don't know. I mean, I think when it comes to that, though, Tom, it's like, where is the moral foundation for us calling something evil if it's not going back to God?
But
What do you put it?
again,
What do you put it up?
you're saying that God created everything. God has a plan, but then it's our fault for evil? No, it's not. It's his. He still put it in us. If it's something that he created, he put it in us. It's not something that we have the evil gene all of a sudden, as a throughout our evolution, all of a sudden humans, it doesn't work like that. Many have said before, it takes good people to do good things, it takes bad people to do bad things, but it takes good people, religion, to do bad things. And you've had, you've chuckled about it, but it's almost true when you think about it. If you want someone to do something rather insane, like, for instance, blow themselves up, religion's a good path, isn't it? Or strapping a bomb to themselves and going into the opposite side and pulling that trigger.
All right, I will concede that. Right, I will concede that and say that religion has been used to do that. But on the flip side, I think that certain communist atheist regimes have done untold amounts of torture and of murder in the name of the state, instead of and saying there is no God to answer to, there is no here, it's all about the here and now and the drive to power. So I think
But
that just
that's not really a topic of our conversation. We're kind of on the, I'm even going along with you. There is a God, and why did he allow evil in this world? It's easy for me to take my stance. There is no God. People do good things, and people do bad things. Just depends on the person, on the day, and
right, but
the circumstance.
you have an intellectual responsibility to provide evidence for that, because if I'm saying here, like, look, Tom, like, say Russia, Soviet Union, they kind of had a proof of opposite in the 20th century. They thought there is no God. We'll create some military atheistic. We'll create atheist police hit squads and interrogation groups, and create a communist state where there is no God, and we have the official.
But we all know that wasn't exactly true, though, because the Orthodox Church survived and flourished today.
Well, now Russia is all of a sudden got hundreds of, like, tens of millions of believers. So they would say that there is proof of the opposite, that they tried.
It was more along the lines of the state. The state was trying to adopt the religion at the time and take the people away from religion and towards the state. But the religion never disappeared in Russia. So the Orthodox Church has been there for centuries. So and today it's quite strong.
Right, and part of my point in saying this is, like, okay, we can't say, oh, the devil made me do it in response to a wrong that I did. But I'm holding to, we can't also say, well, we just have to blame God for everything. There's still a human element.
Okay, let me ask this.
How do you explain it?
If God is going to limit his powers by giving us free will, okay? I'm going down this thought now.
Right.
Essentially, what you're saying is God created a being, potentially, that he knew exactly what this person was going to do and what evil acts this person was going to do, and is now going to tie one hand behind his back as he releases this being into society, knowing full well what is going to happen. That cannot be a good being. That is inherently not a good thing. What just happened.
How do you come to that conclusion if you don't know what's on the other side of?
But your God should know that, not me. Your God should know what this person is going to do way ahead of time. And now he's going to sit back and say God is going to limit his own powers and allow this thing. First off, he's going to create it with whatever intent this thing has to do these evil acts and allow it to happen. Why? What's the point? Why allow these evil acts to happen? You have the power to not create it in the first place. Again, you're the puppeteer. Why are you allowing the one puppet to murder the other puppet, essentially?
Mm-hmm. Well, so you're positing that God is just pulling all the strings and forcing us like robots to.
Well, if there is a divine plan, then yes, that is the case. If there's a plan for you for whatever reason you don't know, because God works in mysterious ways, then yeah, that is the case. You may not realize it's been forced upon you, but it is, if you're going down that path.
But I would just push back on that and say, how can you think through free will then? It is logically impossible to force someone to freely choose love.
I can much easier go by Sam Harris's ideas than I can the religious. So and say there is no free will. You are a product of the chemicals and environmental stimulants at the time. That is what's going to determine your choice. So yeah, I can much easier go by that than I can say that there's some divine free will that we've been given and we've abused.
See, that doesn't explain a lot to me to say that free will is just an illusion. I mean, I feel like because that premise itself is a choice. You're saying I'm choosing to say that free will is an illusion. I mean,
it may seem like what I'm saying is and again, I've actually went back and I listened to Sam's talk on this. It may seem like free will to you. It may seem like you're making a choice, like you're flipping a coin A and B, but who you are, your genetic makeup, the impulses you have are going to always lean you towards one of the two choices. It cannot never be a 50-50 is what he's getting at.
Well, so
you're always going to have a natural predisposition to one side or another.
Sure, and your genetics influences your choices, absolutely.
As well as your environment at the time.
And your environment. But to say that it predetermines and just wipes out free will is just an illusion, I think is a step towards fatalism and absurdity. It doesn't make any sense in our experience of love and our choice to care for. You wake up and choose to care for your children every day. Do you not make a choice to do that? You just think it's just your genetic tendency, drive to further the gene pool?
I think at some point in time it was a choice, and at another point it becomes just something you do as part of your responsibility as a father, right? It's no longer something you consider a choice. It's just part of your day-to-day, that what you do is you care for your children.
But when you use a word like responsibility, that implies duty, that implies values that you are holding to. You have a loyalty
to my children, yes,
of your children that you wake up and decide to every day. And environmental change isn't going to sway you from that, Tom. You're going to continue.
No, of course not. Of course not.
You have some choices with that. And I think that's where Sam Harris's free will is an illusion argument really just goes down the gutter, because it's not intellectually honest, because he kind of denies how that leads towards nihilism, that nothing matters. This life is just absurd. I think
But
that
it kind of, I mean, again, when we can clearly see the Andromeda galaxy coming at us, isn't there an element of absurdity in that, in the actual design? Why would your God design us with that as our ultimate end that we can even see? Never mind our own life. That's the end of human existence coming at us right there.
I like this quote that modern man can't find God because he doesn't look low enough. That you just mentioned
We gotta look under the
galaxy,
barrel.
some galaxy coming at us. It's like it's more about thinking through the oxygen and the mix of O2 and the right levels in the atmosphere and this breath right in front of us and everything right in front of us, the children, um,
That,
sustaining life.
but
That
again, we've
in
done
front of us
that.
shows us that there's a creator.
No, it
What?
shows us that we've adapted our environment for life. That's all it does. What, that you're sitting in your house right now that God built? No. Some guys built your house. God didn't build your house.
Right, but there's an element of order and design to the house that points to a house builder. Why can't I look around at creation and say the order and design of this universe points to a creator of the universe?
Because it doesn't.
How
It,
does it
it,
not? Every single
it,
experience I've
it's a
had.
really bad design if it does. Like, I mean, your house is designed much better than the universe for life, is it not?
Well, like you said, there's certain parts of the universe that are better suited for life. And so we flock to those areas and we use our powers of observation and comprehending where the good water source is or where the good climate is. And we move in that direction. Well, I don't see how it's such a far leap to look at my house and say, wow, the plumbing, the electric work, the electrician, the plumber,
Yep.
the carpenter, they all have such a high degree of design that it points towards builders. I don't think why can't I look at the universe and say, look at all that design? It at least points to some type of intelligent mind behind all of this.
Okay, so take it one step beyond that. Where did that intelligent design come from? Who designed that designer? When does it stop?
Well, why does it have to stop?
Because you're saying it stops. You're saying it stops at your God.
Okay, sure. So I would say that there is an uncaused first cause.
Yes,
And
that
once again gets at our wrestling with eternity and thinking through there being an intelligent mind that put this universe in motion. Um, right. How do you stop the infinite regress of if there is a God, who created God?
if you require, if something complex requires that much more, something more complex to have made it, then that goes on forever.
But that's where I think you're making some type of categorical error. It's like
Why?
saying that the color blue tastes like blueberries. Yes,
No, I'm not.
blueberries are blue, but the color itself has nothing to do with taste. It has everything to do with sight. So when we're talking about God, this immaterial, eternal first cause, it's something that is outside of this universe, this dimension that we inhabit. Does that make
O-
sense?
Okay. Like what's the best way I can kind of put this? If we look at a piece of paper, we don't see a tree, right?
Okay.
But it's still a paper. It's still a wood product.
Right.
We can trace paper back to trees.
Right.
So why can't we trace the origins of your God?
So you're working on the principle of causality and saying that this piece of paper is contingent upon a
But you're
lumber.
saying every beginning requires a cause. So your God requires a cause too.
Why?
Because you're saying everything requires a cause to start.
No, I'm saying everything that has a beginning has a cause. Requires
Okay.
is contingent. Everything's contingent. This shirt exists. Someone
Sure.
paused it because it has a beginning. One day
Okay.
it'll have an end.
Okay.
I had a beginning, therefore I had a cause. Why is it such a leap for me to say God, the creator, If
But, but
is
hold on. Why do you have a cause?
what's that?
Why do you have a cause?
Because I have a beginning. I had a beginning. I had a birth date.
You had a birth date, but what makes you think that there was a cause? What I mean, again, what if a pregnancy was a mistake? There's no cause to that.
Well, right, but studying biology and physics and other
But
realms.
you're saying that there was a rational cause for your birth. I'm saying, what if there wasn't? What if your birth wasn't planned? What if it was a mistake?
I think you making that distinction just lends itself more to there being a rational reason to it. You don't get rational from the irrational. You don't get matter from the immaterial. There's a causality to it.
What I'm saying is your birth could have been a complete accident.
Sure, my death could be a complete accident as well.
Sure.
But to go back to your paper to the tree analogy, can you see that principle of causality that I'm trying to draw out and say, look, like, yeah, they're contingent upon each other. They have, I mean, it's kind of
if this piece of paper required something more technically knowledgeable to have created it,
right,
then that just keeps going on and on and on and on.
Until you get to, and this is obviously what Stephen Hawking was getting at a little bit, until you get to the point where you're trying to understand time and matter and space, and you begin to realize they all have a starting point, where they have a place where they come onto the scene in a coinciding way, and you begin to wonder, well, what started all of that? Something that is not contingent upon time, space, and matter. Something that is immaterial, that is outside of this dimension we're in, and I would posit that that's a creator, the God.
Okay. I just have a hard. I'm curious as to why you can't just say the universe was there, as opposed to saying God's always been there. Why do you need to take it that one step further to go into the realm of magic? Why can't you just say the universe has always been there in one way or another, as opposed to saying God's always been there in one way or another?
Well, then, yeah, sure. Help me see your side of that. How do you just say that the universe has always been there?
In one, okay, so if say there wasn't a beginning, say it's always been some state of expansion, contraction. We've gone through multiple big bangs over God knows how long, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's always, even at the point of singularity, there's still a speck of something there, right? So you're always there's always something. It's
Mm-hmm.
never completely nothing. You're going from a lot to an infinite tiny point to back to a lot to an infinite tiny point potentially. So there could always have been something there, just like you're saying your God has always been there. Why can't you just say the universe has always been there in some way or another? Is my question.
I think because to go back to our discussion of morality, I think because there is this ongoing battle or tension between good and evil, between right and wrong.
What I'm saying is you've already accepted that something is there forever.
Right. Okay. So eternity.
But you're putting it to magic, and I'm saying why not just putting it to the physical of the universe?
Well, how am I putting it to magic? Because I'm just saying that there is an uncaused first cause. How is that?
A God.
Right. Sure. Like I think you're highlighting Plato and Aristotle and some of these others who wrestled with, okay, so the universe, maybe it just keeps going on and on. It's always been here. And yet they still were able to attribute it to some intelligent mind behind it all. They were saying, look, it's not us. It's not human beings who put us here on the earth. There's something before us.
Which is?
There being an intelligent creator, a God, the God.
But why?
I would say, why not?
why does somebody want to be a slave to a celestial master? Why do you want this thing watching over you and potentially convicting you of thought crime?
See, I don't think that that's really an intellectual objection. I think it's more emotional. Like, what is it that
No,
you?
it is an intellectual. It is, I'd say, because I'm asking why someone would want to purposely be a serf.
Right. So, Tom, you're saying that freedom is the ultimate value, and happiness is the supreme goal in some ways for the individual. But in reality, it's not. It's about knowing who started all of this, who put this on here, and what are they like? Like, are they good, or are they, like you're positing, they're malevolent and just a puppeteer and the source of evil?
But again, if we're going by the theory, the theist idea that God created everything, God controls everything, that God knows everything, then he is the puppeteer of our little play right now. He knows the words that are going to come out of my mouth before I say them, doesn't he?
But just because he knows them doesn't mean that he's forcing you to say them, right?
But it wouldn't matter at the end of the day. It's inconsequential. He knows what's going to happen. Therefore, the amount of free will I have is zero because this thing already knows what's going to happen.
See, and that's where I would disagree. I would say just because God knows what's going to happen doesn't mean that God is just approving of all of it, or just saying, evil's fine, it's no big deal. That's where I would say it's very clearly a wrong thing. That's what Jesus taught, and that there will be a reckoning, or some kind of making right of those wrongs one day, and that there is going to be an end point to human history, whether we naturally just burn out through the sun going away, imploding on itself, or some other way, that there is an end. And so either that's absurd, or there's something on the other side of that.
I mean, let me just read you just one thing here.
Yeah.
And it's the one I sent over to you. So you either have a God who sends child rapists to rape children, or you have a God who simply watches and says, when you're done, I'm going to punish you. If I could stop a person from raping a child, I would. That's the difference between your God and me.
Mm-hmm.
Would you stop a child from being raped if you could? I'd hope so.
Yeah, that's kind of like the question, when did you stop beating your wife?
No, it's not.
It's like, well, but here's the thing, Tom. It's like it's trying to catch someone a little bit, but it's also like,
but if you're a human being, there's no other answer besides yes. You're I don't know any human being that is sane that would say, no, I'm going to sit by and watch while this child gets raped. No, you're not. You're going to intervene. If you have half a moral backbone, you will.
Because you recognize that it's not consensual, that child doesn't have a choice in the matter.
Exactly. But your God has created this situation. Again, he's created the perpetrator, he's created the situation, he's put the victim there, the timing, everything. Why? Why allow this horrible act to even happen? It makes no sense. Well, either he's good and evil.
We're either giving the devil too much blame and God too much credit for the goodness of this world, or we're really losing our sight of human responsibility and really our own.
But you have no responsibility. Your God is responsible for you because you are his creation.
No, yours is, because you said free will is an illusion. I said free will is a reality, and I have a choice. I can either choose to give you a hug and give you a high five, or I can choose to blow you away with a gun. And
but God knows what you're going to do before you do it.
Right, but does that mean that God approves of it? I think that's the hard part. And look, Tom, I think you're really raising a good point, because it's like, well, what's the difference between forcible copulation when it comes to sharks and human beings? We say sharks is just part of their natural order. When it comes to humans, forcible copulation, that's rape. That's like you're describing with the kid. That's not okay. That's wrong. And so we're making an evaluation here. And I'm saying the only way you can make a moral evaluation is if there is a universal foundation. And that points back to God. I'm saying, I want to hear from you as far as, how do you think through the intellectual position of No, there's atheism. There's no God. So how do you think through what is a moral absolute then?
Well,
What do
how
you
about
base?
this? We just we crossed over an hour mark here.
There we go.
So why
Exactly.
don't we leave it on,
You're
let's
getting
leave it on
out
a cliffhanger this time.
Gosh, you put it all on me, and then you get out of it. Next time, I'm going to get you. I'm holding it to you. All right.
Perfect.
I
Perfect.
want an analogy. I know I use the bear trap. I want an analogy from you.
Deal.
I try
No
to make
problem.
it contextual to Canada and whatnot.
No problem. No problem. No problem.
All right, sounds good. Take care.
Listen, all the best. Thanks again. We'll talk to you for sure.
Bye, Tom.
Cheers. Bye-bye.